Hey guys, what's up? Nate here from Protoculture and Shadow Chronicles here for Sonic Academy with another how to use video. Today we're taking a look at Oeksound again. We've checked out Soothe before, but we're going to be taking a look at their transient shaper called Spiff. Let's dive in and check this out. Right, so here we have Oeksound Spiff, and it's essentially a multi-band transient shaper, but it's capable, just like Soothe, of doing like very detailed boosts to various frequencies on the frequency spectrum. Let's just take a look at what it sounds like quickly, and then we'll dive into the UI and take a look at all the controls. So this is with 0 depth. So you can hear as I'm dragging around that punch coming through as it's pushing the transients out. So let's dive into the controls and just take a look at how to actually control those transients a little bit better. So you've got two different modes in Spiff. You've got cut and boost. Obviously one to cut the transients out and one to boost them. Just an important thing when you're working with the cut and boost, this essentially flips the interface over. So increasing the amount of transients in any area here, you can only increase upwards, and the same goes for a cut. So pulling down is not going to cut more. This just makes it less sensitive to specific areas. So the same goes for the cut. If you want to cut more, you're going to boost upwards, and you can hear that. Yeah. So then we have a master depth control. So this is the amount of effect that's going to be applied, or how much your transients are going to be boosted by. And then this is kind of also controlled by these four sort of global controls here. Now these also kind of work in tandem with the nodes that you have set up here for the various bands. The sensitivity is the transient detection. So obviously higher settings will result in more transients being picked up and therefore affected, and obviously lower down less. So obviously only your bigger transients or more prominent transients are going to be pulled out. The decay time, pretty self-explanatory, just sets the decay time for the boost. Longer decays, it'll boost for a longer period of time before dropping back down to the normal volume. The sharpness control, it's you can kind of look at this as like a resolution control for the boosts. So Spiff doesn't just boost this bell here, it picks out the sort of prominent frequencies in the transients in this area. So you can see when we dial this back to 0, you'll have a much smoother response. And watch in this area as we dial up the sharpness. You can see those little boosts to various points in the frequency they become almost like they've got a much narrower Q value, so much sharper boosts. And you can kind of hear that in the tone as well. You kind of get these sort of more resonant frequencies pushing through when you boost the transients. The decay, LF and HF, works in tandem with the decay time as well. You set your global decay there, and then this essentially skews it in one or the other direction. Having it set at 5 will be equal response across the whole frequency spectrum. As you come down to 0, you'll have much shorter decay times up in the high frequency area. The lower ones will be longer. And as you dial up to the maximum setting, you'll have much longer decay times in the high frequency area and much shorter decay times down at the bottom. Let's check out some of these controls on this side here as well before we move into this main frequency area. You've got two different modes. You can have left and right, mid-side. This is handy in conjunction with the balance here. In mid-side mode, you can actually apply the effect to mid only or to the side only. This will obviously, but 100 to 100 will be balanced across the spectrum, and that applies to the left and right as well. Stereo linking, pretty much the same as you have in compressor settings. It's a common compressor control. 0 will affect the left and right channels differently. They'll be processed independently. With stereo linking up at the maximum, it'll be the average between the two. They'll both be applied the same amount of boost on the left and right channels. You've got an advanced tab here as well. You have different resolution settings for the process that's being applied. Oversampling, pretty self-explanatory. And then the window settings. So the window setting pertains to the FFT that's used when applying these transient boosts. This will just affect the window size when it's moved to an FFT. Medium is kind of the balance between the two. You're going to use the short one for sort of simpler audio. Let's say, for instance, if you have a hi-hat track or something, if you wanted to pick up super fast transients, this one is going to be the one to go for. There'll be less ringing in that as well. But if you're working with, say, polyphonic material like a guitar sample that we'll look at later, the more natural sounding choice is going to be the longer window. It's better in the frequency domain, but not quite as good at picking up really super fast transients. So you can kind of dial those in to suit your needs depending on what audio you are pushing through the plugin. And lastly, you also have a minimum phase mode and linear phase mode for the EQ boosts that are being applied. I know this is a transient shape, so it's volume being applied, but remember this is being applied at specific frequencies. So obviously with these sharpness settings up, you're applying very fine EQ boosts. It's dynamic EQ boosts essentially. So there are cases where you may want to dial in linear phase to prevent that phase from occurring with those sharp little boosts. But just bear in mind, as with any plugin that has linear phase mode, it will increase your latency quite a bit. Right, and then lastly, this is pretty self-explanatory down at the bottom, the mix, dry, wet. We've got a trim, obviously you're applying boosts. It's quite a lot of volume. You want to be able to back that down again. The delta setting is essentially the difference between the output of the plugin and the input of the plugin. So this is just a really handy tool for focusing on what's actually being applied. If we apply that, or turn that on, you're only hearing what's being added to your audio there. And it's kind of handy this as well. You can kind of use this to, if you rendered this out as well, to sort of isolate areas of a loop, for example. And sort of just pull out maybe a kick or something like that. It can be useful in a creative situation as well to kind of isolate sections of audio just to pull out the transients and render those down separately. And lastly, there's just a bypass control. Again, pretty self-explanatory. So let's just take a look quickly at these nodes, the sort of multi-band section that you have here. These kind of function like EQs. They're not necessarily EQs. They basically adjust the settings in tandem with the master settings that you have here. So obviously these set at 0. Your sensitivity, just turn the delta off. You can see there's not a lot happening with the sensitivity being turned up and down. That's because these are essentially multipliers for the sensitivity dial. So you have your global sensitivity set, and then this will basically adjust how much of it is being applied in the specific area. So fairly self-explanatory. As you push this up, you have more boost in this area. You can adjust the Q value to have really sharp boosts in just a specific area here. Or you can widen that out. You can change these to a high shelf as well, low shelf, and a tilt. Lastly, in this section, you've got a low pass and high pass filter. So this basically just sort of focuses the area that you are working with. If you want to be pushing out transients just in the middle, for example, you can just limit the effect to a specific band here. And just pull out those mids if you want. So that pretty much covers most of the controls, aside from the usual A/B functionality. You can copy to B, for example, and then readjust A and A/B between the two of them. Yeah, that pretty much covers most of the workings of this plugin. I'll just take a look at one other example so you can listen to it on some different material. We'll take a guitar loop, for example, and let's say we want to, this time we're going to work in cut mode. And so we wanted to reduce some of the transients on the guitar strings to make space maybe for some percussion or something that's being played over that. We can now do that with the cut mode. We'll dial the depth down first. And let's, we'll limit the low band around here. And we're going to be looking for those sort of transients created by the strings of the guitar. So we can put this into delta mode. You can also just switch on band listen, which will solo just this band. And let's sort of boost this up now to try and find the transients that we want to remove. We can set that onto delta now as well. So the band listen is useful for setting a single band. If you want to kind of get the overall effect of all the bands working together, then switching it to delta is going to be the one that you're going to do. And let's get these like really tight and short. What we can do is, I'm going to also set this, because we're working with polyphonic material, and set this to a long window. And this is a guitar sample as well, so there's a lot of resonant frequencies happening in there. So I'm going to dial the sharpness quite far up as well. And you can hear a little bit of that ringing occurring now because of the long FFT window. You can actually take a listen to the difference between the short. And you can hear it's a little bit more crispy and detailed, but not really what we want. It's kind of creating a little bit of weird phasing there, so we'll stick with the long. And let's say that that's what we want to pull out, those little string attacks. We'll leave that set to 5. And let's take a listen to what that's doing. We'll dial that back to 0, turn the delta off. So you can hear it's an incredibly natural way of pulling out little elements like that. We've pretty much maintained the tonality and the character of the guitar, but just pulled out those little clicky string noises that we're getting from strumming that. So really, really useful tool. There's a bunch of really cool usage examples that you can do with this, just because of the amount of fine tuning that you can do. I use this quite a bit on drums, but also on sort of bass lines, just to pull out the attack, like a lot of psytrance material. I'll pull out just the sort of top end of those saw bass lines. And also for, you know, fine tuning loops, if you are using loops, for example, it's really easy to isolate just certain areas of your drums, for example, and just pull out maybe just the attack on the kicks, for example, or pull out hi-hats to make them a little bit louder and a little bit more punchy. For example, let's just try and get the kick to punch a little bit more with this. And let's just solo this. Let's try and bring out the punch of the kick around 100 Hertz. Trim down slightly. And the sharpness, we can actually reduce the sharpness down here. We don't need really detailed sharp response there, because it's low frequencies, they're quite wide. So a wider, less sharp or smoother curve is going to be just fine there. The sensitivity will dial that quite far up, maybe just get just the beginning of the kicks out, and then take a listen again. We'll turn the delta back off, or the band listen back off, and dial in the effect. And you can hear how much more punchy the kick is now that we've isolated that area and boosted the transients from the kick. Cool. So that pretty much wraps up Oeksound Spiff. Great little plugin. Definitely go check this one out. Also, check out the video for Oeksound Soothe as well. Another great plugin. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you guys soon right here at Sonic Academy. Cheers.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.